Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvtam. I'm so excited today to be joined by Mr. Clark Ruhland. Clark is an employee of the city of Salem. He's a graphic designer for VT Equipment. He's the Hokies history guru on Twitter. He also does some work for NASCAR and NBC. Clark, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, glad to be here, Billy. Appreciate it.
For sure. Looking forward to, I'm sure, as you are, 2021, ready to get 2020 behind us.
Who
But
isn't?
Yeah, for sure. But I wanted to ask you, first of all, how have you been doing this pandemic? I mean, of course, like we talked about, 2020 has been a crazy year. How have you been handling everything?
It's been obviously it's been different. I'm one of those people that is always on the go. I love going places, love going to sporting events, love just in general, just going out and going on a hike and that kind of stuff, which you could still do during this time. And I've done plenty of hikes in this area, but not going to racetracks. Like you said, working with NASCAR, I didn't work one race this year. Part of it was just because of the pandemic, because, traveling and all that stuff was kind of locked down a little bit, but NASCAR really limited the number of people at the racetrack. So NBC only had a handful of people at the track. So the guy that I work with, the chief spotter, he worked every race, and he said it was just not really that fun. Going to the racetrack, you go by yourself, you go to your spot, you do your check-in, you sit and you wait for like 2.5, 3 hours doing nothing, sitting in your car. He's like, it's just not fun. It's not what you would think. I mean, yes, the races are going on, but it's completely different. And I enjoyed watching it on television. I mean, I know all those guys that put that show together and put those broadcasts into play, and so it was definitely fun watching. But it was kind of a bummer not being there, but you make do and keep moving forward, man.
For sure. And how have you, because I think you're one of the few people who has actually, that I know, that's actually been able to go to Lane Stadium to see games with the limited amount of people they have. How have those experiences been like watching the Hokies with, 500 people maybe in the stands?
The first 3 or 4 games had 1,000 people. And I was lucky enough working with the equipment staff at Tech. I was lucky enough to go to the first few 1,000 people games. But man, it's not even like going to a scrimmage. Everybody's having a good old time, and you just know that the stadium is empty. But going there and they're playing the band on the big screen, and this is a real game, but it's just, man, you sit there and you wish, man, I wish people were here. But I'm glad they were at least able to have fans for some of the games, and the players knew about it. They were playing to the crowd a little bit, and but I'm glad that this part of the chapter is over. It wasn't sad. It was just like, man, I can't believe this is happening, kind of thing. But the few games that I went to, the NC State game right at the beginning of the season, that was a whole lot of fun. A very unexpected game. We got to see Khalil Herbert for the first time, and he's legit. Got to see a couple other different games, and Boston College was a fun one. Even the Miami and Liberty games were down to the wire. I mean, they were nail biters. Didn't get to go to Clemson or Virginia, but I consider myself really lucky to have gone to a couple of games. But the best way to describe it as a fan experience, it's like going to a basketball game. I mean, you drive right up, you park, you walk in, you go to the game. When the game's over, you leave. There's no tailgating, none of that kind of stuff. So I kind of compared it more to a basketball game. I mean, both the first 2 games of the season were at 8:00. So you sit all day. Well, hey, in a normal season, you're going and tailgating and visiting friends and doing all sorts of stuff. And you got the whole day to blow. And sometimes that's kind of a bad thing, but you got the whole day to hang out and enjoy and be together. And then by the time 8:00 rolls around, you're finally ready for the game to start. But, in this kind of scenario, you're just sitting around waiting, twiddling your thumbs at home going, I guess I should probably leave at about 6:30 to get up there by 7. I mean, it was different for sure.
Let's go back to more happier times. I consider you to be a super fan of the Hokies. So what were your earliest memories of Virginia Tech and going to games?
That's a good question. I started going to games when I was about 8 years old. A lot of people take their kids when they're really young, and I my first real memories were in kind of the mid 90s. I was, my first game was in 1993. My dad used to work for the state police. And so a guy that worked in his office was the main state police contact for Blacksburg. So he was down on the sidelines for every game. And so in 1994, he told my dad, he says, let me take your son down on the sidelines during a game. And this was the Pittsburgh game. So it was mid-October. It was a lot of fun going down there on the sidelines. I mean, I'm short at the time. I'm just a kid, and he lifted me up and let me touch the Hokie Stone. And I was just in awe. I mean, I'm 9 years old. I don't really know the seriousness of the game. I'm enjoying seeing the Hokie Bird and seeing the band and the Corps Cadets, and they're all doing their thing. And it was just an array of color and excitement and sound. And so being down there, it just connected me. And that was a family thing from that point forward. Every weekend in the fall, during school, it was every week, when's Saturday coming? When are we going back to Blacksburg to a game? And that was the time of the program really taking off. I mean, 1993, the bowl streak started. And so, 95, they had a great season, 96, 97, you could really tell. And then of course the 1999 season was just a magical season. And, I was a freshman in high school. I was decked out in tech gear every day, kind of like I am now, and so that was definitely a neat experience to be connected to that era of tech, because, they weren't what they are now. I mean, they weren't a national brand. They were the regional brand. There weren't a lot of people going to the games. It wasn't a sellout. You could go to the games for $5. You could scalp outside for $5, or, we used to get free tickets all the time. It wasn't the thing as it is now.
Well, and then you end up going to Virginia Tech, and you end up becoming the Hokies history guru on Twitter, where you post, on this day, Tech did this and et cetera. What made you decide to start doing that?
I don't really remember why I got into doing that little, everyday tweet kind of thing. I've always been into the history of tech, even before I started going to games, but it always sparks memories for people. And Twitter is really good at connecting people. I've met a lot of people. I mean, I've met you through Twitter, so connecting with people, it's a lot more fun to do that interaction. And everybody has memories when it comes to tech football, no matter if it's, hey, I remember when that play happened, or you remember before the game we went to Tots and got a rail before the game, and then we went and tailgated, and I don't even remember what happened in the game, but you remember that day, that kind of stuff. Everybody has a connection. Right now we're in bowl season, and so today was the anniversary of the Belk Bowl, and that was the largest comeback in tech history. And so seeing people reply their memories of going to the game, or their memories of watching on TV and having given up on tech, or they almost left the stadium and they decided, nah, we'll stick it out just to see if Arkansas scores one more time. And then there's this miraculous comeback. And those are the kind of things that I love seeing, because everybody has a connection. Everybody has a story, and we're all Hokies. So that's a great connection. Now, going back to how it got started, I would every once in a while just go back on the history of the schedules and just be like, man, that game against Georgia Tech in 2004 was on this date. I'm just going to tweet a picture of it. And now there's this program called TweetDeck that you can run on Twitter, and you can preload tweets. So I'd go on there. I'll just pick a random evening in August and go in there and just start copying and pasting. And at this point, it's the same thing over and over. I mean, you can go back and look, it's the same tweet every year on the same date at the same time. And so I'll just go in there and copy paste and then add the pictures. So I've got all the pictures and just go in there and add them. And, as I add them back in there, I have that remembering sensation of, man, I remember going to that game, or I remember the Nebraska trip, or I remember going to Ohio State. And so it's fun for me. And then as the season gets going and those start coming in and people are replying, and I'm like, why am I getting notifications on my phone? And it's like, oh yeah, today was the Ohio State game day. Of course, everybody's going to reply and say how much they remembered that. So it's fun. It's fun for me and it's fun for everybody else. And, I'll continue doing it as long as I can.
Well, that's great news to hear, and also great insight to hear on your process as the Hokies history guru on Twitter. You're also the graphic designer for VT Equipment, and I was actually reading, Clark, that you were actually the guy who designed Frank Beamer's farewell logo. So how did that opportunity come up?
Well, I guess so. Going back to, it was November 1st, I believe, in 2015, and the race was at Martinsville, and I was actually on the roof when the announcement came up that Beamer was retiring. Everybody had kind of assumed it was coming. I honestly assumed that he was going to announce his retirement before the 2016 season, because, you got the Bristol game, the trip to Notre Dame. So I just didn't even think twice about having the retirement being until 2016, just have that tour kind of thing. So heard about the retirement at the racetrack. That day was Jeff Gordon's last victory. And so that was just an absolute crazy nutty race. And so I got an email from the guys from the equipment office that evening, and they're like, Beamer's making an announcement to retire. We're thinking about, doing some kind of decal memorial honoring his legacy decal on the helmets. Well, would you be interested in doing a design? And I was like, of course I would. So I knew immediately that the best design would have to be related to that 1999 season, because everybody always will have in their memory bank when the Boston College game was over and all the fans rushed the field, and the Marching Virginians bring their drum major stand to the middle of the field. And Beamer gets up there and they hand him the microphone and he says, "I want to see you all in New Orleans," and that moment will always stick in my mind. And so I'm looking down at the field and I'm like, man, this is absolutely crazy. So I knew that was the pose that it needed to be. It needed to be him with the fist in the air, holding the microphone. And so from that point on, it was just playing around with different designs, circles, ovals, squares. And so, getting that fist in the air, kind of separating it from the oval was the main focus. Had to limit the colors, obviously, because, you want to put it on t-shirts, you want to put it on, different things. You got to keep the colors as low as you can, but still have that detail in there. So also adding the 3 Big East championship stars on one side, the 4 ACC championship stars on the other side, have his signature, and be recognizable. Frank's a recognizable guy. He's the king of Blacksburg. So you had to have his likeness on there, and it all came together pretty quick. It may have been going back and forth with John Boleyn. It was less than a day, because we had to get this thing ready. Luckily, the weekend after that was the bye week, because it led into the Thursday night game at Georgia Tech. And so we're all having a discussion, like, how are we going to do this? We're going to get these patches made for the final game at Lane Stadium. We want to put them on the helmets. And I was like, this is the opportunity to do a throwback helmet before he retires. Go back to the original white face mask with the maroon shell and the stripes going down, because Tech hadn't worn the stripes in more than a decade at that point. And so Boleyn was like, let's do it. Let's ball out for Frank's last couple of games. So we ended up working to get the decals made for the helmets, and the decals came in before the patches did. So they went ahead and put the decals on for that Georgia Tech game. So that was a 10-day turnaround to get 1,000 of those decals made in time for the games. So it was really cool to go down to Georgia Tech, go in the locker room before the game, and see all the helmets sitting there with the white face masks and the decals and everything. So it was really fun.
That's certainly amazing, and I do own one of those shirts, so I'm glad to own a piece of your artwork. What's the best Virginia Tech game you've been to?
The best game. Now, are you talking about the best game or the best trip? Because there's a difference.
Well, let's go with the best game first.
The best game. It's hard to beat the Ohio State game in 2014, just because it was so unexpected. I think it was the second game of the season, and the trip going up there was a lot of fun. But once the game got going, and you're in Ohio Stadium. I mean, you're in the Horseshoe. This is an iconic stadium in college football, and Tech's going toe to toe with them. They're taking off. They're putting it to them, and then with the interception late, to seal the deal. I mean, man, that was just absolute pandemonium. I don't think I've ever been as excited at a Tech football game than that day, just because it's like, this is Ohio State. I mean, this is not some chopped liver team. I mean, they're one of the best teams ever, and they didn't win the national championship. I mean, no one thought that was going to happen, but after the game, Ohio State fans were actually really good. I mean, they were great. They were like, man, y'all just came and took it to us. And it's like, we can't believe that this team of guys came into the Horseshoe and just knocked Ohio State off the ledge. That was a great trip. Probably my favorite road trip of all time, though, was probably Nebraska. In 2008, some friends of mine, we drove from Blacksburg to Lincoln, Nebraska. It was about a 20-hour drive. But, man, it was so much fun just because the fans are so welcoming. You get there, and it's Nebraska. There's not a whole lot going on in Nebraska. And so, especially when there's no animosity or anything, it was just so much fun because everybody's like, you guys came all the way from Virginia. We're so excited to have you. And I will always love Nebraska. They were some of the nicest fans, and it was a great game. It was kind of surreal, like going to Ohio Stadium. You're at Nebraska. I mean, this is the triple option team that just tore through Tommy Frazier. I mean, all the guys, all the legends from Nebraska, and they show this video before the game starts with all these legends of Nebraska and Tom Osborne, and it's just like, man, this is unreal. We're in Nebraska of all places, and the fans were just as friendly before the game as they were after the game, and it was an amazing game as well. So those are two that really stick out in my mind for sure.
What about Bristol? I'm sure you being a NASCAR guy, I mean, 100,000 people in the stands, Virginia Tech, Tennessee, that's probably got to be up there for you too, right?
It was so different because yes, it was a Tech game and there was a lot going into it. I mean, there's the jersey right there. The uniforms themselves, I'm always the uniform guy. I always kind of relate to the uniforms. I heard about those uniforms long before they were designed. Long before they were released. And, I saw the jersey first, and then we worked together to come up with about 3 or 4 different helmet designs that might match with the jersey and the pants. So it was kind of cool. I mean, they didn't release that uniform set until like 2 or 3 weeks before the game. And it was just neat to see the reaction. But there was a race in Bristol 3 weeks before that game. I mean, it was not a long period of time. It was a very fast turnaround. So to be at the racetrack for the Cup race, and after the game or after the race is over, knowing I'm going to be back here in just a couple of weeks to see Virginia Tech play football, and it was really neat to walk into that stadium or walk into the racetrack and see how it had been transformed. I've been going to Bristol races since the mid 90s, and that night race at Bristol in August. I mean, that was the creme de la creme of going. If you got a ticket to that race, it was something special. And so going in there, going to that game after tailgating and all that fun stuff all day, to see that place packed was just surreal. I hadn't seen it. I mean, the races at Bristol, they're not completely sold out. There are some empty spots in the stands, but man, it was shoulder to shoulder in that place. And it was more than they'll ever have for a race again. And it was a one of a kind, unique experience. I mean, Tech didn't have the best game that night. They couldn't hang on to the football, but it was just really neat to be there and to look around. I was able to go down on the field for the pregame and just to look around at the place and go, this is what this place used to be like. And a lot of people had never been to there. They'd never been to Bristol for a race. So it was neat to take friends that had never been there for a race to go for the game. After years of experience going to Bristol, I knew where to park. I knew all the ins and outs. When the game was over, we pulled chocks and we got out of there, and people were still sitting in the parking lot, 3 and 4 hours after the game, and we're almost home because, I'm like, this is where we have to park. This is where we got to go. We'd go left, right here. Takes us 81, gone, but the pregame and college game day. And, that was just after the Wood brothers had run the Virginia Tech paid scheme. So some of the Wood brothers were there on the day of the game. One of the Wood brothers, Leonard, both his granddaughters graduated from Tech. And so the whole family was there, and we were all having a good time. And it was really neat to see the crossover because there was a NASCAR race that day in Richmond, of all places. And I ran into Leonard tailgating and everything, and walking to the game, ran into the guy who's the president of Toyota Racing Development. He's a Tech graduate. I'm like, shouldn't you be in Richmond tonight? He's like, I'm not missing this. And so, there's still that little bit of NASCAR flavor, and they had the cars, the show cars sitting on the racetrack and everything. It was the best of both worlds. Tennessee played a much better game, but it was a lot of fun just to see it, to be a part of it. Knowing that that's the largest college football crowd that will ever be. I mean, I don't think it'll ever be topped. And two great fan bases like Tech and Tennessee, and it was a perfect spot. I don't think it'll ever happen again. If it does, I'll be surprised. But it's something that will last forever for sure.
For sure, definitely a memorable day. I have to ask you, what's the worst Tech game you've been to? And you can classify it as either the most gut-wrenching loss, like they had victory snatched from the hands of defeat, or you can say a blowout, like the Duke game last year comes to mind as one of those type of games.
That Duke game was pretty rough. There's just nothing would go right with that one. I think the game that I remember that sticks in my mind that I couldn't get over. Well, I mean, there's several that will really set me off. The first one that I think of is the 98 UVA game. Tech had a big lead at halftime and blew it. It was at home in Blacksburg. I had made a bet with one of my buddies who was a UVA fan, and he ended up going to Tech, which is kind of funny. He's a big Tech guy. He and I are best friends, and I made a bet with him. I would wear something UVA if UVA won the game, and he would wear something Tech. And we laugh about it now because he's got Tech helmet on his wall and wears Tech stuff every day. So it's kind of funny. Other games that just set me off. The Kansas Orange Bowl in 2007-08. Man, Tech just never even got going in that one. And then the Michigan Sugar Bowl. There were so many things that led up to Danny Cole's catch that put Tech in that situation. And they should never been in that situation. Michigan wasn't that good. I mean, Denard Robinson was the only guy that they had that day, and he made it happen. And Tech just made too many mistakes. I mean, I don't dwell on bad games. As the years progress, it turns more into the excitement of going to the games and being with friends and family and the community that Virginia Tech is, both physically and emotionally. And so those games they all are water under the bridge at some point.
For sure. Who's on your Mount Rushmore of Virginia Tech players? I mean, you've seen all of them pretty much, at least in the last 20 plus years. I mean, who's on your Mount Rushmore, the four guys you would say best players you've seen?
Best players I've seen? Well, I mean, obviously Michael Vick is number one. I mean, we talk about NASCAR. I mean, I tell people all the time, NASCAR is hard to explain when you see it on television versus being there in person. The speed sensation is not anywhere captured on television. That was the same thing with Michael Vick. Like watching him play live, it was just like, holy cow, like what is he doing? This is nuts. David Wilson was one of those guys that could the speed was there. And so it was a lot of fun just watching and you going to the games. I mean, you didn't know what was going to happen. He could spin out and throw it 60 yards downfield to Andre Davis and a touchdown, or he could tuck it and run for 70 yards and evade 6 tacklers. It was insane to watch. A lot of fun. I mean, just a lot of fun to watch. Other guys that are on that Mount Rushmore list, it's hard to really narrow down 4 guys, Billy. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there's a lot of guys that were fun to watch. I mean, Darryl Tapp is one of my favorite players of all time. Just outworked everybody, and is just a good dude. Like, when I was a student, I worked for the Collegiate Times and covered the team for several years, and Darryl was always the best guy to go to. Not only because he gave good quotes, but he was just like the nicest guy. And every answer, yes sir, yes sir. There aren't many guys that I have stayed in contact over the years, but Darryl is one of them. I mean, I saw him the week he came join the staff. I repainted his lunch pail. I mean, he's just one of those guys that he's the epitome of a Hokie, both on the field and off the field. Just the nicest guy. His roommate was James Anderson, very quiet dude, but just as friendly and as nice as you can be, and one hell of an artist. I mean, he was an art major at Tech, and he was a relentless guy on the field, though. But it's hard not to include Tyrod. Tyrod was, he was the second coming, I guess you could say. I mean, he elevated Tech, in that era of the ACC. He was fun one to watch. But so was Brian Randall. I mean, he was another one of my favorite players, maybe because he was the quarterback when I was a student, but he had sneaky skills. He was a guy that you knew could make a play when we needed it. And so it was a lot of fun to watch him as well. And also just super nice guy from Williamsburg. I mean, just super nice guy.
Sure. Clark, do you think that Virginia Tech still has a passionate fan base? I mean, obviously the team has struggled in recent history. We haven't been able to get back to consistently competing for ACC championships, or at least for the Coastal Division. And, there was talk last year when we had fans that, a lot of fans would leave early, and, it didn't feel like, at least to a lot of the old Hokie fans, that we had the same passionate fan base, especially from a student perspective. Do you feel that way at all? I mean, what's your take on that situation?
Well, there's always passion. There's no question about it, whether it's good passion or bad passion. There's always that connection. And as long as you've got that connection, in recent years, passion may be swayed a little differently depending on the day. Tech is always going to be Enter Sandman, no matter how you look at it. Most students today, they want to be there for Enter Sandman. They want to experience it. They want to shoot their videos. They want to jump up and down. And if the game kind of goes awry, or if, they just lose interest, they leave. And that hurts a little bit as someone who slept out late trying to get tickets to a game my freshman year. Just that kind of stuff. Just it's a little disappointing, but there's always going to be passion. It'll go up and down at times, but there's always those people there. Right now it's a little negative, but it'll turn around. There's always going to be that. Basketball is also one that people are up and down with, and right now everybody's up. I mean, we got a guy that's leading the boat right now, and it's a lot of fun to follow Mike Young, and he's kind of opened up the program a little bit. Let people kind of see what's going on, and that the passion, yes, it'll always be there for sure.
So what do we need to do, Clark, to go back to consistently competing for ACC championship games? I mean, you mentioned when you were a student, it seemed like Tech was kind of right there in the mix with, the national programs. And really the last couple of years, it seems like we've been struggling, to make it 6-6, make bowl games, beat UVA, especially in those final few years of Coach Beamer. And recently in the last couple of years with Justin Fuente. I mean, what do you think we have to do to really get back to at least competing for the Coastal Division and, maybe even with Clemson here a little bit?
Well, there's only so much we can do. I go to every game. I'm there supporting the team no matter what. What the team does, that's what they're there to do. It's hard to say what the coaching staff can do to change. I mean, this was just a rough year. I mean, they just had a couple of close games. I know that they hate losing just as much as we hate seeing them to lose. It's not something that they like. So that they'll get it straight. They'll get it figured out. They're trying to get everything going, and I totally understand why they're still there, because they don't want the sour taste. And Tech fans, as long as they can hang in there a little bit, I think things will be all right.
For sure. What's one place you'd like to go? First of all, Tech play the team, but what's one place you'd like to go you haven't been to yet?
Like in terms of
like Tech playing, and then you would travel there to see them play on the road. Maybe you haven't been yet.
Well, my number one pipe dream is to see Tech play in the Rose Bowl. I would absolutely love to go to the Rose Bowl. I always said that the year that Tech had the bowl streak end, if I hadn't gone to the Rose Bowl, I would go to the Rose Bowl. Now, obviously, we can't go to the Rose Bowl this year. They're not even playing it at the Rose Bowl. So is it really the Rose Bowl? I've driven past the stadium. I've always watched it on New Year's Day. It's just something I would love to see once. I would love to see that stadium and that green grass and the parade and everything that goes along with the Rose Bowl. That would be my number one objective would be to see Tech play in the Rose Bowl. That is the granddaddy of them all. I mean, there's nothing that gets any better than that. I mean, yes, a national championship or a playoff or that kind of stuff, but man, just to see Tech play in the Rose Bowl. I mean, one of my buddies, he went to Georgia, and Georgia's never going to play in the Rose Bowl, right? Well, they played in the college football playoff against Oklahoma a couple years ago. And he's like, it was the greatest experience ever. Yes, they won the game, but you got to go see your team play in the Rose Bowl. It just doesn't happen.
For sure. And Clark, you've been so gracious with your time. So I have one final question for you. I mean, like I mentioned, you work for NBC on NASCAR. And obviously, I think it's safe to say NASCAR is at least, I think, more of a regional sport. I think nationally, there are, significant portion of people that, probably don't pay much attention to it or don't understand what's going on. I mean, if you were trying to pitch NASCAR to someone or try to explain it any way you can, I mean, I know you've kind of already alluded to this in our earlier conversation, but is there anything, what would you pitch to people in terms of trying to get them to watch NASCAR?
Well, I always tell people that NASCAR is one of those few sports, really it's probably the only sport that can really touch the most senses. Obviously it's fast. You see it. There's a lot of lights, a lot of colors, but you can hear it. I mean, it's crazy loud, but you can smell it. There's not many sports that you can smell. You can't smell the fumes of a baseball game. I mean, if you do, there's a problem. But you can smell the burning rubber. I mean, you can go stand next to the racetrack at a place like Martinsville and be 5 feet away from the car zooming by, and you can smell the rubber. You could taste it. I mean, it's there. But most of all, you feel it in your chest. And that's what got me. That's what got me hooked. I went to my first race when I was 8 years old at Martinsville, and to see the bright colors of the race cars, like that DuPont paint scheme with the bright yellow number and the blue and the green and the red, like all that, just it really popped. And I mean, I'm a young kid, so all that is so impressionable. And to see these race car drivers up close and that kind of stuff was a lot of fun. But it touches the senses. And the other thing is you never know, much like a football game or a basketball game, you never know if you're going to have a good race or not. not all races are good. I mean, I've been to some really, really bad races, but going in that there's a chance this could be one of the best races I've ever seen. And the people that see those races live, they get kind of hooked. And so, racing is not for everybody. NASCAR is definitely not for everybody. But when you go to a race and you see it live, it's a different perspective. I mean, another example, I've been to one golf tournament my entire life. I went in Charlotte. Now it was all right. It was neat to see Phil Mickelson be 6 feet away from me, or Tiger Woods teeing off at a box, and I'm 4 feet standing away from him. It's neat, and I'll watch golf tournaments from time to time, especially the majors, but I don't get into it. I've been there, I've seen it. It's neat. I don't play golf, so it's not for everybody. Golf is not for everybody. NASCAR is not for everybody. But if you go with the right person who can teach you a little bit, because there's a lot of intricacies that go on with NASCAR. I mean, Billy, if I ever took you to a race, I'd be telling you this. It'd be an information overload. But the people that go to these races, they are passionate. You go back to passion, like Virginia Tech fans in general. You go to a race, there's not just fans of one driver. There's fans of 30 drivers. You see random guys wearing Dale Earnhardt t-shirts, or Bobby Allison t-shirts, or Chase Elliott t-shirts. You see the variety of fans and how long they've been around and how many races they've gone to. You got young kids, you got old guys, you got families. It's such a wide band of passion when it comes to races. But it all starts somewhere. But going back, you gotta get them to the racetrack. It's hard, and someone that doesn't know anything about racing, they probably won't want to do it unless somebody can lead them in. And I try to do that all the time. I love taking people to the racetrack for the first time. I mean, it takes me back, just to see what, from the eyes of someone who's never been to a race, to see a car up close. I'm like, yeah, I see them all the time. It's neat. And the people that are working in NASCAR, I like to see those people. But when it comes down to it, it's the drivers and the machines, and so getting someone to see that for the first time, man, it's awesome. And some get hooked, and some say, it's just not for me. So hopefully it's more of a hook than a pass kind of thing.
For sure, some great perspective on NASCAR. And really quickly before I let you go,
yeah, I got plenty of time.
But for sure, you can confirm that you'll be Hokies history guru for the foreseeable future. No plans to change that anytime soon.
No, man. It's like I said, it's sitting down on an evening and just think, getting them all in there, kind of thing. I like I said, I love having the interaction, and it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. It's interaction, and that's what Twitter is all about. Is connecting people, and there's always that little slice of life that I enjoy with the Hokie history tweets.
For sure. Well, Clark, this has been such a pleasure hearing your perspectives on not just Virginia Tech, but NASCAR as well. Can't thank you enough for your time today.
Sure thing, dude. Anytime. Glad to talk, and it's good finally connecting with you.
For sure. That's Clark Ruhland, who works for the city of Salem. He's a graphic designer for VT Equipment, spotter for NASCAR and NBC, and of course, most importantly, Hokies history guru on Twitter. This has been the latest edition of The Pulse with BP. Thank you so much. I'm your host, Billy Parvitam. We'll see you next time.